to Concussion Talk Podcast. My name is Nick Mercer. I write Concussion Talk, www.concussiontalk.com. This is episode 19. Today I'll be talking to Katherine Snedaker. Katherine is the founder of Pink Concussions, www.pinkconcussions.com, which is dedicated to the improvement of the research, medical care, and community support for females with brain injury, including concussion. Okay, so I'm now talking to Katherine Snedaker of Pink Concussions, and I will get her to introduce herself and talk about her background a little bit.
Hi, thanks for having me on your podcast. I professionally have a master's degree in social worker. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. And then on the brain injury side, I had my first concussion in sports, probably when I was about 16 years old, and then had 2 car accidents, both in one in high school and one in college, which really sort of set me on the trail. Up to now, I've had about 25 concussions over 30 years. I concuss every year and a half or every 2 years. This has been a bad couple of years. I've kind of concussed a couple of times this year, in the last 2 years. I started Pink Concussions in 2013 to look at female brain injury, and that's kind of the space that I'm spending most of my time in working right now.
Well, it's great. So I was going to ask you if you've been concussed, but you obviously have. And actually, when I contacted you last week, you said you had been concussed. So you've recently been concussed as well, have you?
Yeah, it's been about a week now, week or 2 weeks. I can see it mostly when I'm quiet. I can tell that my brain is reverberating, and scrolling text really makes me nauseous. Like, I've been off Twitter. You can always tell. Like, we always joke that instead of return to play, it's return to Twitter. Yeah. And when I'm concussed, I can't have scrolling text.
That's probably healthier for anyway.
Ugh, this makes me sick. But yeah, I generally don't tell people. Like, I told one of my board members and one other person, and I just gutted it out. So I love to change it so that when people get concussions, it's more natural to share with people.
Yeah, well, that's good. So, okay, so that kind of leads me to... But you started Pink Concussions, you said you interested before earlier, so... Would you like to talk about Pink Concussions and why you felt it was important to introduce this and what you hope to do with it? Pink Concussions.
In 2008, my son got a concussion at recess, standing there hit by a soccer ball. And that started me, he was out of school for 2.5 months, and that started me researching about concussions and going to medical conferences. So from 2008 to 2013, I spent in the youth sports side, and I have a website called sportscap.com, and then I helped schools and local sports organizations set up concussion plans. And I got called in by the NFL because they liked what I was doing, and spent a couple of months talking about doing a program with them. In the meantime, I was helped doing a support group for kids with post-concussive syndrome, and it turned out to be 13 girls and 2 boys. And the 2 boys got better before we started. So I spent 10 weeks, 4 hours a week with 13 girls with post-concussive syndrome. And talking to those girls who never met each other, I really saw some similarities in their experience. Then I wanted to do something, and then I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and working in schools and working with teams probably wasn't the best thing when I was going through chemo, so I started thinking about doing a website. That became Pink Concussions, and right during the Super Bowl in 2013, Roger Goodell and Jim Nantz were discussing concussions, and Jim said to Roger, women's soccer players concuss more at a higher rate than male football players. He screwed up the quote, and everybody on Twitter was like, "Where did that come from? Where did that come from?" And I knew the study he was talking about, so I threw it out there that, hey, I got this study up on my site, Pink Concussions, and then it just was kind of like wildfire after that. I was at an NFL press conference when the GE $10 million initiative was started, and at the time 10 million seemed like a lot. Now they just offered 100 million. But I said Pink Concussions. I'm a reporter from Pink Concussions, and that got in Slate magazine. So it's been a really catchy term. There are people that don't like it and think it's derogatory, but it's a really short way to have people know exactly what I'm talking about. So now we have we've had a website for a couple of years. We have run support groups online. I have a whole group of interns that have worked for me for a couple of years. We did a conference at Georgetown Medical School this past February, which is the first in the history of the world meeting on female concussion and TBI. And in about 2 weeks, we have one at the VA in Palo Alto, and then in about 6 months, NIH in Bethesda. So right now we're trying to train the doctors and pull the researchers together to really have a sense of how female and male concussions are different.
Oh, you're sounding really, really busy. Yeah, so you started off obviously with male, like your son, and run football more, so you're more male concussions. But you end up going towards female brain injury, and concussion was became interest through that group. Only all the girls were left after the boys healed. So
yeah.
So what? That's why That's why you started Pink Concussions. But
Yeah.
can you?
And so many people were already doing the sports. Chris Nowinski is just amazing. And anything I wanted to do in sports kind of replicated what Chris did. And Chris and I are friends. And I didn't want to do anything that would compete with what Chris was doing. So I was also looking for a space where I could do some work that other people weren't doing. So in 2013, there was no one doing female head injury. And only now in 2016 do you start to see it as a topic. It was here and there for an hour on every conference may have had an hour presentation or, a little segment here and there, but nobody thought there was enough content there to pull it all together. So what I've tried to do is pull together all the great researchers that's out there that just didn't have a place for it all to gel together So there's so many amazing experts working on this, and they each have their little piece. So I've just been the glue to try to pull all of their great work together in one place.
As well, because on your website you give a lot of studies and a lot of research about this, but you also mentioned 3 important facts about female concussions. So can you just tell everybody what your 3 main facts are, 3 important facts, and why they are important?
One of the things that we've noticed about female concussions is that females concuss at a higher rate than males. Now, if you piled up all the male concussions in the world and all the female concussions, men have overall numbers more concussions. Partly because you guys do more stupid stuff. And if you go on the internet and you type in jumping from roof to pool, 100 out of every 100, 100 out of every 101 on there is going to be guys jumping. Once in a while you'll have a female that takes risks, which is personally what I did as a tomboy. But in general, you guys do more stupid stuff, more risk taking, more fast driving, So there are more male concussions than females. But if you take 1,000 hours of play of a particular sport, and it's been shown in a number of sports now in soccer, in basketball, in softball, and you take 1,000 hours of men playing versus 1,000 hours of women playing, and depending on the sport, women cuss 2 to 3 to 4 times men. Wow. So that was one of the initial studies, and they've had this data out since 2009. This isn't cutting edge data. And I was actually in the congressional briefing on this, and one of the congressmen asked Don Comstock, how much more research do we have to know? And Don's like, we don't have to do any more research. We know this is true.
So who's Don Comstock?
So Don Comstock is a great researcher who researches something called RIO, and that's where high schools put in their concussion levels.
Okay.
So Don's been doing this work, showing this over and over, but people really didn't care. Yeah. And doctors were kind of writing it off and saying, well, women just complain more or report more, which kind of annoyed me because I talked to the girls that I talked to and the experience that I had working with. I found plenty of girls were hiding their concussions. The next part is their symptoms are different. They have generally more symptoms than men. Men will maybe, if there's 25 to 30 different symptoms of a concussion, men may have 2 or 3. Women have 4 or 5 symptoms at the same time. They also seem to feel them more intensely, and there may be a hormonal component behind that. And then they take longer. Women take longer to recover than men in general. Not every woman's going to take longer than every man, but if you look at the together, it shows women take longer. Now, we don't know whether that's because women take longer or whether we're not doing recovery properly for women. And so that's one of the things that I'm working very hard on, is trying to see, trying to push a different clinics to really do female-based treatment to see if we can find a way to cut down the amount of time it takes women to heal from concussions.
Okay, well, so actually, you're to change these, not change these facts, but improve them. What are you doing? Like, 3-part question here. What are you doing, research-wise, medically, or publicly, to try to help improve this, the ratio and the length of recovery?
You may. Those are 3 things in a row. You may have to
Okay.
And I don't know if I can do 3-part question. Okay.
Okay. Research-wise.
Research-wise, I'm researching. I'm on my 3rd year of tracking 11,000 kids in the Norwalk Public Schools, the city that I live in, and I track their concussions over an entire school year. So this will be the 3rd year. So I have the number of concussions in our school, which are usually about 111, 112. But I have by gender, by age. I can tell you the female concussions in the middle school that were sport, male concussions in the high school that were non-sport. So I have this really great data, and I'm going to be publishing that next spring with University of Connecticut. And then I have a research paper that was published this year, so I'll be presenting that at a couple of conferences coming up this fall. Okay, so that was research-wise.
Okay, so you're doing this personally. You're doing these. But it's Pink Concussions. Is there any research in the wings that Pink Concussions wants hold of?
Yeah, so that's through Pink Concussions that I do that.
Yeah.
And then what politically, that was the next one?
Well, medically or publicly, both. I guess politically is publicly really so.
So this conference at the VA is really important. It's really important because our organization, and I think we were the first to do this. I'm seeing this more often now, but we do sports, violence, domestic violence, stranger violence, trauma, which is accidents, and military service. We do the whole spectrum across women's lives. And so that can be shaken baby to youth sports, to learning to drive a car, to dating violence, to military service, to accidents and fall, to elder care abuse. So it's really the whole spectrum of a woman's life. So we have a conference coming up at the VA on October 6th and 7th of this month.
Where's it again? It's at Palo Alto, California?
Palo Alto, California. So that's really great. And we're having a lot of military people come to that event. And then the next event is in March, a 2nd and 3rd, also a free event at NIH, the National Institutes of Health, and that's in Bethesda. So we're really excited to be able to be the kind of the lightning rod of bringing all these really amazing people together. The last, I can't retain. The third one.
So it's kind of missed all the other. So it's research medically and publicly. So you just speak whatever publicly or medically.
I talk to a lot of reporters. I try to be available for every reporter that calls, and sometimes that'll be 3 or 4 reporters a week, and sometimes it'll be 1 or 2. Sometimes it's TV. Sometimes it's magazines. I'm in a magazine called The Key, which is a sorority magazine. It's national, and it goes to all the sorority sisters of Kappa Kappa Gamma and all the houses and all the parents. That's coming out, a feature story on female concussions. So it takes a lot of time. You don't earn any money for doing that, but it's just trying to get the word out there. a lot of the times I'll be the backbone of a story. I won't mention us or Pink Concussions, but a reporter will call and say, hey, can you fact check this for me? So it's really important to try to help reporters, connect them with doctors, connect them with people that have had, women that have had concussions that want to talk to reporters. So I just try to help reporters get better stories and more stories out on female brain injury.
And are these reporters just general reporters, like reporters for general interest, or are these mostly more like, are they more sports reporters or female writing female issues, or
sometimes it's women's health, sometimes it's sports stories, sometimes it's a school reporter on a back to school event. But it kind of varies, and I just try to be available for everyone. And I have resources that I send out and links. And it takes up a lot of time, but I think it's pretty valuable.
Yeah, you seem very really busy both ways with that and with the event you have for Pink Concussions, this Palo Alto conference and the one in March. So you do like you try to have conferences every 6 months or whatever, or do you just have them when they come across along?
I ran 4 conferences in 2014 on Return to Learn and how schools can prepare to manage kids' concussions better. I took a year off to fundraise for the Georgetown event. And so I'm trying now to get a conference out every 6 months. And what we've been doing is free conferences to try to get as many people as possible. It's tough to put on a free conference. So I'm hoping in the next year to switch over to a model where we have people pay to come, but then it'll be less work on us to try to fundraise. But it was important to get all the scientists together. I didn't want to go out there and say, this is what we know about female brain injury until I'd gotten all the really smart people together and synthesized a lot of their data. And the other thing we like to do is encourage new researchers, young researchers, people still in graduate school. So if we can get them to talk about concussion from an overall gender standpoint, a young researcher has 30 or 40, 50 years of research ahead of them. So if they can come to one of our conferences and get inspired to do this kind of work. And the thing is, if we know males and females are different in brain injury, and if we can figure out why, if we can figure out it's substance X or hormone X, then that can be a possibly something that we can tinker with and help women and men.
Actually, this leads on to my last few questions are kind of one switch the other. But when you work as a social worker, because it sounds like you're focused a lot on Pink Concussions. When you're working actively as a social worker, was there understanding of your colleagues of the differences between female and male concussion, or was there any real recognition that there was a difference?
I worked in 2 concussion clinics, and there wasn't anything different about how we were supposed to work with the clients. And I think a lot of the times the female injuries have just been kind of written off by doctors going, well, women are just more honest. My female patients are just expressing more. So yeah. I think it was kind of written off as, it's a girl thing. Not in a cruel, way, but, just I don't think that the women's it's hard because I get in trouble for sometimes saying these things, but I got slammed. I used the term in one interview, sexist, and I got slammed. Oh. I get a lot of hate mail, yeah. But let's just say that I don't know if women's pain was viewed as equal to that of a man. I know it depends, but
I think we know what you're generally kind of getting at there, but.
So one of the things is that women and girls are not told that their concussions potentially could last much longer than a man's. And if there's more men out there that so I say I know 10 guys that have had concussions, I know 1 female because there's more guy concussions. Exactly. So those guys get better. All my friends got better in a week, and I'm 3 weeks in. What's wrong with me? And now I'm 2 months in, and suddenly relationships around me with school and my family and my job, and things start falling apart. So what I want to do is change the protocol that women are like, hey, this might be 3 to 4 to 6 months recovery. What kind of supports would you need? Hopefully you'll be better in 2 weeks, but just in case, how can we support you? And, maybe getting, if you're in school, a tutor, and just making, maybe you don't, you take a leave of absence from your part-time job, or just setting stuff up that's better. And I get women that call me every week that say, I'm 3 months out. Am I ever going to get better? What's wrong with me? What am I doing wrong? And I'm like, you know what? Honestly, until you cross over that 6-month sweet spot, you're still in the recovery phase.
Yeah.
So I just lower the stress that they have. Like, you know what? It sometimes takes, and I've seen kids take 2 or 3, 1 or 2 years to get better.
Yeah.
And again, it's the combination of, what do you need to learn to live, with brain injury, what do you need to learn to live with, and what's going to get better over time. I can't remember anybody's name. I call everybody honey or sweetie. There are things that I do that I just can't remember names. And if I don't take my ADD meds, it's really obvious, and I constantly lose my car keys, and they're just things, and you can get really worked up about it. I was kind of concerned about CTE, and I'm in the CTE study, the Legends study, legacy study, Chris Nowinski's, and then all of a sudden I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I said to the doctor, you don't understand. I'm a head injury person. I'm not really interested in cancer. Yeah. And he's like, it's not a choice,
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't do cancer. You don't understand. I'm going to die from CTE. And he's like, well, you're going to die from cancer if you don't do something about this. I'm like, okay. So, actually getting cancer had me really be much more relaxed about brain injury, because I realize now you don't know what's going to get you. So
yeah,
I don't worry about CT anymore. And I consider it a game. Like if I wake up and I can't find something, I'm like, okay, this is a game. Let's pretend it's a video game. Where did I put my shoes? So I try to kind of play with the memory issues and not get to, and I keep a key. I keep extra keys hidden places. I keep backups on my backups, and sometimes I end up with, no credit card, no money somewhere, and I lock my keys out,
5 sets of keys and stuff. Right?
Yeah. So, my kids laugh at me sometimes, and, I don't know. I'm single, so I don't live with another adult that would sort of follow my, wow, this is the 3rd time you've locked yourself out this week.
Yeah. So you gotta keep an eye on yourself, kind of.
What?
You have to keep an eye on it yourself.
I guess so, but it's also like I also don't have that pressure. I sometimes wonder whether I don't get in another relationship because I do wonder how what someone would think of some of the deficits. I mean, I do incredible things. Like I've done incredible things. I pull together people that would never consider going to a conference together. I do really great things. And then I lock myself out of my car, constantly. So
do you have a dog there?
Yeah, it's my dog.
Yeah, I heard of him.
It's my shepherd lab.
What's his name?
His name's Moose. Her name's
Moose. Her. Hey, Moose.
You
said it.
But so, I on some levels, I think it affects my life on a daily basis. I'm maxed out on ADD meds. I can't take any more than I'm currently taking for this particular drug. I've been trying to drag it out. So I don't know, I always joke we should put together a dating site for singles with brain injury, and they hook you up. You hook up with other people, go into dementia together, and I don't know.
All the fun stuff, yeah.
I watch a lot of people in the brain injury field struggle with it, and I think it's hard to do as a single person. I think it's also hard to do in a relationship.
Yeah.
So Jay Fraga, I was looking at, he did Jay Knockout Project. He and his wife just saw Bob Cantu, and they were talking about the fear of CTE and how brain injury affects them and as a couple.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of stuff to be done still with female brain injury, and I'm hoping to be useful as long as I can to do it. And
Is there one change you can point to and say, okay, well, this has changed a lot since I remember originally thinking about it, hearing about it, or thinking about it, or noticing the issue?
I think the one thing that I want to change is that when they do concussion education in schools, they do it with boys in one room and girls in another room, and really talk about the reasons that kids hide concussions. And I think girls hide concussions for different reasons than boys hide concussions in the middle age.
As often, but for different reasons.
Yeah, and I think there just needs to be sort of an honest discussion about it from a gender standpoint. And, an understanding that when concussion lasts, a couple of months, it's not like those kids are faking. It's a struggle. And I've watched two of my three boys have gone through multiple concussions. I do think there's probably a genetic link, why some families tend to have more concussions than other families. But there's so much we don't know. We know like one drop in the ocean about brain injury and concussions. So that's the thing. The closer you get to the experts doing the work, you realize how little we know.
Yeah. Well, this is enlightening. This is a really good chat because heard a lot of info, a lot of new stuff I didn't know about. I wasn't sure the stats and the information you gave, and you obviously know a lot about it and cared a lot about it. And yes, I think this I hope this conference in Palo Alto goes well. And the conference in Boulder is that next year?
It's in Bethesda, which is Maryland, and it's this giant campus, NIH, National Institute of Health. And National Institute of Health employs 300,000 people. It's the largest health organization.
It must be everywhere in the country, is it?
It's massive. It's just you have to go through like airport security to get into it. It's amazing. So the fact that they're interested in this and are willing to host us is kind of like a dream come true. So
I think that's great.
Yeah. So and the military is really interested as more women move to active duty combat and training for that combat. So the VA has been very supportive. And the next thing is to bring on domestic violence. And what I would personally love to do is that everybody that works in a domestic violence shelter or clinic has the same skill sets that, like, when we teach coaches and parents on athletic fields, that you can screen and, identify a possible concussion so that you can, if a client comes in and holding their head like, oh, I have such a bad headache, I have ringing in my ears, I'm kind of seeing double, that someone will know that those symptoms could be a possible head injury and know to ask and then flag that person for medical provider. So there's a lot to do. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
There's a lot to do. Yes. Women
I've met with brain injury are all awesome. And so, yeah.
Well, great. Well, and thank you. I met a great woman tonight with brain injury. I met you, so I'm saying.
Yeah.
So, so thanks so much. And, so hopefully these conferences go well, and we can keep in touch on Twitter or on Facebook or so.
Yeah.
Mentioning actually before I shut off this, mentioning your Twitter, Facebook, or anything you want, anything addressed to people can find out about you.
Okay, so it's pinkconcussions.com or at Pink Concussions on Twitter, or I also, for the sports one, Sports Cap, which is not the best URL, but it's CAPP, sports with an S, CAPP. It's Concussion Aware and Prepare program. And then the other thing is you can do hashtag PinkTBI, which is the shortest.
Hashtag PinkTBI on just any tweet, really.
Yeah, in the tweet world. We're going to try to do some either Periscope or possibly live feed from the conference. Still working on that.
Wow, great.
But and then we're writing a paper from the last conference, so we'll be hopefully publishing that soon too.
And those will all be on pinkconcussions.com?
Yep. And I think that's it. Yeah, Pink Concussions on Facebook and Instagram. We're kind of everywhere. Thank
Great.
you.
Well, thank you so much, and it was a great chat. I learned a lot. So thank
All
you.
right. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you again to Katherine for talking to me today. Don't forget to check out Pink Concussions at www.pinkconcussions.com, on Twitter at Pink Concussions, on Instagram, and don't make sure you visit and like her page at Pink Concussions on Facebook. I would also like to mention that I'll be speaking at the NL Wellness Expo at the Remax Center in St. John's on Sunday, September 25th from 1:45 until 2:15 p.m. It'd be great to see you there. Thank you all for listening. Until next time. As always, the music at the beginning of this podcast is by Ben Sound. www.bensound.com.